I don't have it on the list, but I had a number of years ago, about 3 years ago, I wrote an article about taking out a dustbin onto the street on Yom Tov. My question here was, on Yom Tov, you're allowed to carry stuff which you need on Yom Tov. Now, it happens to be, it's Yom Tov is on Thursday, my bin collection day is on Thursday. The council doesn't allow me to put the bin a day earlier. I'm only allowed to put it on the day. Am I allowed to wheel out the bin out onto the street on Yom Tov? I don't need it there. I need the rubbish out of my hair. Yeah, that's true. But I do not have a positive need for the rubbish out there. I'll give you an example to understand my question. Let's say I borrowed 10 chairs from a neighbor, 20 chairs from a neighbor for the Yom Tov night meal. Yom Tov by day, house is empty, they cleared the house. I want to have the kids to have a room space. I've got all these chairs. Can I carry them back across to the neighbor on Yom Tov? I don't need them there. The neighbor doesn't need them on Yom Tov. It's not a carrying l'tzoyrich Yom Tov, but I need the space. I want them away from my space. So is carrying, not because you need it, but because you want to get that nuisance out of your way, is that kind of carrying allowed on Yom Tov? That's really my question. So in my article at the time, we had just started Gemara Shabbos. So this is Cheshvan Tovshin Ayin Ches, and now we're almost finished. So it's just about 3 years ago. And we spoke there in Gemara, it talks about a large kaveres, a hive, which is 10 tefachim high, and it's 4 by 4 tefachim. So it's a kind of a portable Rishus HaYachid. And the Gemara says if you carry it out into the street, you're not punishable, because wherever that hive lands, it is a Rishus HaYachid. So when I take this large container, put it out into the street, it didn't land in the street. It landed in its own space, which is a Rishus HaYachid. So if so, I had a chap. So let's say the wheelie bins, which are more than 10 tefachim high, they're more than 4 by 4 tefachim square. Every wheelie bin is a Rishus HaYachid. Although I don't plan on living inside one. So now it's called Rishus HaYachid. So then it's really carrying it out to the street is not considered carrying, because wherever it is, it's a Rishus HaYachid. That was what I wrote up this idea. And so this week I got a message, an email from Rabbi Broin, one of the tremendous Talmid Chacham, one of the Rabbanim in Crown Heights. And he wrote to me a whole list of comments about this. So he's been sitting on it for 3 years, and he came up with some fascinating insights. When it says that if you take this, it says hazorik kaveres, one who throws a hive. So some of the Meforshim say that's only if you throw it, but if you actually wheel it or you carry it, not throwing it, then you'd be chayiv. And one of the proofs which they bring is when the Yidden were traveling in the desert, so they would carry the Oroin, they would carry perhaps the Mizbeach we mentioned. So they carried items which were 10 tefachim high, and so we should say that, well, if that's the case, it is a malacha. So that's one of the arguments he brings. Then he brings also from a Chassam Sofer in the Gemara over there, which says when you threw the kaveres, you're potter, but who says you're potter for the contents of the kaveres? Let's assume that the kaveres was an empty container, and so you're potter for the actual container, but perhaps the contents you're chayiv for, which is a bit, actually I'm not so convinced, because we have the idea, let's say you have a box, and the box has got oranges, and you put the box halfway out into the street. So you've got a concept which is called Eged Keli Shmei Eged, that since the box is still half in the house, you're still potter for the oranges, even though some of the oranges are totally in the street because they're all in the box. So that's not so straightforward. Then there's another svara. A svara is that if something is more than 10 tefachim, we know that Rishus HaRabim only extends till 10 tefachim off the ground. This is 11 tefachim. The wheelie bin is 11 tefachim. So therefore, it's never fully landed in Rishus HaRabim because part of it is above the 10 tefachim. So these are various svaras which would mitigate. I just want to add another point, that after I published this article, someone pointed me to a letter of the Shevet Halevi, Rav Wozner Zichrono Livrocha, where he talks about this, and he takes the view that carrying out rubbish because it's offensive is called Tzorech Hayoim. Even though I don't need the rubbish in the street, but if where it is now, it is offensive to me, so it's called Tzorech Hayoim. I have a need, not an objective need. I have a negative need. But so according to Rav Osner, it would make sense that to take the chairs across the street to the neighbor on Yom Tov, even though it's just to get the stuff out of the nuisance out of their way, he would possibly see that as a Tzorech Hayoim. So
Dayan,
a wheelie bin in the garden.
wheelie bin, you're doing it for the council, not for you, because you would leave it in the garden.
right, unless that's true. I'm not so happy with it, unless where you keep your bins is a space which actually, over the last 2 Yom Tovim, I was standing right near my bin because I had a minion in my front garden. So I might have had a heter over there. I didn't use it. But so there are tzdodim. I wrote back to Rabbi Broin, you're talking right, there are, I thanked him for these various sources which kind of reduce the heter, but you still have various sirufim. You've got Rav Osner's approach to say it's tzorech hayoim. You've got a svara to say it's because it's taller than 10 tefachim, it's connected. And then there's a svara to say some other svaras. And
What about muksa?
And then I threw in. Then again, it'd be if it's offensive, you've got the heter of Graf Shalrei. Again, it's not so posh. But let me just finish off. So Mitzaref, the fact that Rav Osner says it's a heter because it's bothering you. Then it's possibly not called a tzor because it's had. Then throw in that big red herring that possibly we don't have a Rosh Hashanah deraisa. I know I've said just the opposite before a few weeks ago, and it went viral. But so these are various tzirufim, and there's a general style in halacha. If something is where you've got various arguments, each one on its own is not enough. But when they come together, we have the idea of chazilitz tarufi, reducing it to a sofik and a svek, and so there is room to be makel and hamachmir yachmir and yes. So Tovi Olav Bracha. Yes, someone wanted to ask a question.
Dayan Raskin,
Yes,
what about wheelie bins?
we're talking about wheelie bins.
Good, so it's a wheelie bin on Yom Tov muksa or not?
They are muksa because the rubbish is muksa. I'll tell you like this: the recycle stuff I don't think is muksa because it's a bottle. But it's a bottle or a paper, a box. It's not muksa. It's not offensive. The other rubbish is more offensive because it's repulsive. It is muksa, but if its presence is offensive, and let's say if you're going to leave it there for another week, and this is an interesting question. Let's say today it's okay, but if it's going to be left there, it's going to have blue bottles all around. Does Kovod Habris, listen to this question. If Kovod Habris today is not being assaulted, but if you leave it, next collection is another week, or in the generous borough where we are, it's once in 2 weeks, and you're going to have an assault on Kovod Habris in 10 days' time. Is that a heter today to move muksa because it's going to be an assault on Kovod Habris in a while? I don't have a clear answer on that.
Because what can happen is, let's say, our weekly bin collection is on a day which is Yom Tov.
Exactly.
So we put it at the edge of our garden. They come and they collect it, empty it. All right, we put it there before Yom Tov. They come and they collect it, and then they just leave it anywhere. Right?